Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Would you leave us a note in the comments and let us know that you can hear us loud and clear, and then we will be ready to begin in just a moment. Hello, everyone. This is Allegra Davis Hanna, and today I am your facilitator, not your presenter, and we are here today to talk about Tecumseh's curse, presidential deaths, and assassination conspiracy theories. Our two expert presenters are Dr. Leah Tarwater and Professor Missy Wilson-Mertens. Both of them are history professors here at TCC Connect, and I see that many of you are actually in their classes, so thank you for sharing that. I do want to let you know, to just ease your anxiety, that as soon as the presentation is over, within about 5 minutes, we will post the link to the Google form that allows you to get extra credit. So once this is over, the link will be there, all right? So there's Dr. Tarwater, there's me in the middle, and there's Missy, Professor Wilson. I always call you Misty, I'm sorry.
Misty's fine.
So we have 3 more webinars in our upcoming series. The next is vaccinations, vaxxers and anti-vaxxers, scientific literacy and democracy, and the last one is confronting denial. I'm sure your instructors who told you about this webinar have given you all the information you need about those 3, but if you're not sure about dates and times, check with your instructor. Okay, you guys ready to kick it off?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so first, somebody tell me, what is Tecumseh's curse? Because I learned how to pronounce it, but not what it is.
All right. So Tecumseh's curse is supposedly a curse that was put on the presidency of the United States. And the way that this goes is supposedly William Henry Harrison kills Tecumseh.
Who's Tecumseh?
An Indian chief. We're going to get to that in a minute.
Got it.
And in his dying breath, Tecumseh curses the presidency and says that if he dies, every president elected in a year divisible by 20 will die in office.
That seems very specific.
So in English, what that means is if elected in a year that ends in 0, you will die in office. And what you're seeing on the screen right now,
just a few guys,
is a bunch of presidents that were elected in a year that ends in 0.
Did they all die in office?
We're going to talk about that too.
Okay. I'm already intrigued. So who is Tecumseh? Or who was, I guess.
Yeah, was. Yeah, he's not here today still. So
that we know of.
yeah, there's lots of that going on in these stories. A lot of conspiracy theories about people not actually dying when they were supposed to have died. But Tecumseh was a Shawnee chief. He was a chief, wasn't he? Mm-hmm. And he worked really hard to unite Indian tribes up and down the Mississippi River to resist westward expansion of the United States. So pretty much he was creating a multi-tribal confederacy, uniting these tribes to rise up against U.S. expansion. And in 1811, the governor of the Indiana Territory, William Henry Harrison, led some led the U.S. Army to Prophetstown, and Prophetstown was the headquarters of Tecumseh and his brother Tenskwatawa, also known as the Prophet. Thank you. So Tecumseh was actually gone at the time that Harrison marched on Prophetstown, but the U.S. military defeated the Indians in Prophetstown and burned it to the ground. And it really sent this Confederacy into disarray. It kind of fell apart after that. Of course, this is going to be one of the things that leads to the War of 1812, and Tecumseh is going to, and a lot of these Native Americans are going to fight with the British against the United States. But so they blame William Henry Harrison for really how this Confederacy falls apart. And actually, it's you say, I mean,
I said the supposedly.
What?
The supposed legend is.
Yeah, that Tecumseh. Yeah, and so this is where you see the discrepancies and stuff like this, because I've read a lot of stuff that Tecumseh cursed it. Well, his brother, the prophet, I also read that he cursed it, and it's funny because I read that. What I read was that when Harrison became president, or when he learned of Harrison's victory, that he cursed Harrison and every president that would be elected in the same, in years ending in the same number, 0, as Harrison, which sounds really fascinating, except that Harrison was elected in 1840 and the prophet Tenskwatawa died in 1836. So it's probably hard to curse him once he's already dead.
But not impossible.
I guess not.
If we're believing in curses.
If we're believing in curses, we might as well believe in that too.
All right, so we want to walk you guys through the presidents that are affected by this curse. So the first one in 1840 is going to be William Henry Harrison. So William Henry Harrison is our shortest serving president. Served just about a month. He tried to give a really long speech out in the cold, got pneumonia. Our cure for him was to wrap him in something called Virginia snakeweed, and we gave him opium. And then surprisingly, he did not survive.
You tell me opium didn't cure pneumonia?
Nope.
Shocking.
It is really shocking. All right.
He died.
So the next one, not a laughing matter, I apologize. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln is going to be elected. And of course, he is going to be assassinated in 1865 by John Wilkes Booth.
So you say.
Yeah, we'll learn more about that.
All right, in 1880, James Garfield is elected. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant man. Probably had the potential to be one of our greatest presidents ever. Unfortunately, he is shot and killed in 1881 by Charles Guiteau. Now, interestingly, he doesn't die immediately. It took him a few months to die because the bullet got lodged in him and he got sepsis, and that's how he eventually died.
Oh, that's even worse.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Next, we have William McKinley, a progressive president who's going to be, actually, he was a progressive, but he was a Republican, right? He was a Republican president who was elected in 1900. And he is going to be shot and killed in 1901. Seeing a trend here.
Mm-hmm. In 1920, we have Warren G. Harding elected. He makes it 3 years.
Yay,
and then
Warren.
he eventually is going to get sick and he also dies.
But he's not shot.
But he's not shot. He just is natural
causes.
causes.
Yeah. Then in 1940, Franklin Roosevelt is going to be elected once again.
For the third time? No, fourth time.
Fourth time in
Fourth
1940. And he is going to die in April 1945 of a cerebral hemorrhage.
All right, and then in 1960, I'm going to hope that you guys all know this one since we're right next door to Dallas. Kennedy is going to be shot and killed by Lee Harvey Oswald.
So you say.
We'll talk about it. Which brings us to 1980.
Yeah, and the president elected in 1980 was Ronald Reagan.
And he
broke the curse, apparently. He was shot by John Hinckley Jr. In March 1981. He was shot in the shoulder, but he survived. And so apparently has broken the curse. And because in 2000, George W. Bush was elected and clearly survived his presidency.
He choked on a peanut, though. That was as close as we got.
He did. He choked on a peanut. And there was, so he survived. So we have an election coming up in 2020, and I guess we'll see. We'll see with the next president if it's really been broken. All I'm saying is, I don't know if I'd want to run for president in a year that ended in 0.
All right, so we're not telling you that curses are real.
No.
But we are telling you it's a nice, easy way if you're in American history classes to remember who died and when. So if they're elected in a year that ends in 0, up until Reagan, they probably die in office.
So I can come up with a conspiracy theory that this was all invented by history teachers to get us to remember
well, it became
presidents and their
popular
deaths.
with Ripley's Believe It or Not, so you can blame them.
But we should notice that not all presidential deaths fit this pattern. Zachary Taylor is one that does not.
Mhm.
And you really need to examine each and every one of these things on its own. I don't think anybody really assigns the curse to their deaths, right?
Yeah.
No, and actually, I had a student this semester who pointed out why I think it was McKinley. There was like maybe not even a paragraph, like 2 sentences in the textbook dedicated to his death. And so as I went back and looked, there was 1 sentence to Garfield's death. And so there's not a lot of attention given to it in the textbooks. But as far as from us, it is one way to bring their attention to it and help them to remember it for sure.
Getting into some of these specific presidential deaths, we tend to find a lot of conspiracy theories surrounding presidential deaths. And we find lots and lots of people that believe in these conspiracy theories. And so one of the things that we looked at here was why. And so I found this really great quote by William Manchester. He is a biographer of President Kennedy. And he went into this trying to find a conspiracy. He wanted to find out why Kennedy was murdered. And so this is his quote that I think really encapsulates why we want to believe in these things. Those who desperately want to believe that President Kennedy was the victim of a conspiracy have my sympathy. I share their yearning. If you put the murdered president of the United States on one side of a scale and that wretched waif Oswald on the other, it doesn't balance. You want to add something weightier to Oswald. It would invest the president's death with meaning, endowing him with martyrdom. He would have died for something. And I think that idea is really present in a lot of these theories we're going to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Searching for meaning, wanting something to be more meaningful than he got pneumonia giving a speech or a lunatic shot him.
Right. It's the president of the United States. So there's got to be a greater reason, or, it's got to have led to something better, or it's hard to wrap your mind around.
Well, and I don't think any of us want to live in a world of chaos where just one lone person with a gun
can kill the president of the United States.
Yes. So we want it to be almost a conspiracy theory because it's almost comforting in a way if it is.
Isn't that crazy?
Tell us about this real conspiracy.
Yeah. So, in fact, on occasion, there are real conspiracies that lead to crazy things like presidential deaths, and that is the case for Abraham Lincoln. So Abraham Lincoln, of course, the Civil War is going to end early in April 1865. And then on April 14th, Abraham Lincoln and his wife are going to go to a play at Ford's Theater, and they sit in a box. They're accompanied by an Army officer and his fiance, and they're enjoying the play when a guy by the name of John Wilkes Booth actually comes into the theater, enters the box, walks right up behind Abraham Lincoln and shoots him in the back of the head. The audience thinks it's part of the play until Mary Todd Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's wife, screams, and then they realize something is wrong. There's a doctor present, and so he runs upstairs to check on the president. And the president is slumped over, paralyzed from the wound, having a hard time. He's struggling to breathe. And so they put him on a door and carry him across the street where a boarding house is. And they lay him on a bed that he's too tall for, where he will die the next morning. The Surgeon General of the United States comes and examines him and says there's nothing we can do for him. He'll be dead by morning. And in fact, he was. Lincoln is now dead, and the killer is John Wilkes Booth, who was a fairly famous actor, not as famous as the rest of his family. After shooting Lincoln in the head, he jumps off the box to the stage. So the box is up in the balcony. To the stage where he actually injures his leg. He actually breaks his leg. And then he runs out of the theater where a friend, a conspirator, is holding his horse, and they flee town and begin heading south. So the president is dead, and what we begin to learn is that there is actually a conspiracy to murder the president. So the conspiracy involves a number of people, but it wasn't originally a plan to kill the president of the United States. It was a plan to kidnap him. So they had planned on March 20th, 1865, and notice this is before the end of the war. The plan was Lincoln was going to a play that was at an army hospital. He was going to go attend that. And on his way there, they had a group of guys who were going to stop the presidential carriage, kidnap him, take him to Richmond, which was the Confederate capital, and then they would ransom him and benefit the Confederacy that way. Okay, so the plan was to ransom the President of the United States. But he never shows. His plans got changed that day, so he never rode his carriage down that road. And John Wilkes Booth wasn't okay with that. And then, of course, Robert E. Lee surrenders at Appomattox Courthouse, and the war is over. And that's when Booth's plans changed to murdering the president. But he didn't just want to murder the president. He also wanted to murder the vice president, Andrew Johnson, and the Secretary of State, William Seward. And so on that night, April 14th, there were two other assassins, one who did attack William Seward, who had been injured earlier in April in a carriage ride and was in bed. He broke his jaw and was injured pretty badly. So he was in bed, and this guy entered his home, stabbed his son and I think a nurse in an effort to get to Seward, stabbed Seward multiple times. But actually, I think what saved him was that he had a broken jaw. So he had some sort of metal contraption on because of that broken jaw. And they think that prevented a fatal blow with the knife or a fatal stab. And so he was severely wounded, but he survived. And then the guy who was supposed to attack the vice president got cold feet. So he didn't. He actually went to the boarding house or hotel where the vice president lived, but didn't go to the room. So there's a conspiracy to kill them. The whole point was to throw the U.S. government into disarray, and then hopefully, if the U.S. government is thrown into disarray, the Confederacy can reorganize, attack the United States, and win, which of course isn't going to happen. So Booth is killed. This is one of the largest manhunts in history. About 10,000 soldiers, police, and detectives were involved in this manhunt to find John Wilkes Booth. When they find him, they try to get him to surrender. The man who is with him, which is in that group of conspirators right there on the left side, top left, he's to the right. Okay, how do I even say that? The second from the left. David, what's his name? David Harold. Thank you. He's the guy that accompanied John Wilkes Booth, and he actually came out and surrendered. Booth ended up getting shot in the neck and died. And so later they arrest all of these other people. So the four on the left are all going to be tried, convicted, and hanged. So the guy at the top left, his name is right there is Lewis Payne. He also is known as Lewis Powell. So if you read about him, a lot of times it actually says Lewis Powell. He's the one who stabbed Seward, the Secretary of State. David Harold, of course, accompanied John Wilkes Booth. Bottom left, George. I think it was George. I can't say that guy's last name. He was a German immigrant. But he was the one who was supposed to assassinate the vice president, but does not. And then you'll notice there's a woman, Mary Surratt. And it was her boarding house that the conspirators met at, and she's going to be the first woman executed by the federal government. And that was a little bit controversial. Mm-hmm. But the other people weren't actually, the other four guys were involved in the conspiracy to kidnap the president, and so they get life in jail. They get a life sentence. But what's interesting, and of course, if you know anything about the story, Dr. Mudd, who treated John Wilkes Booth's broken leg, also was given a life sentence. But at the end of Andrew Johnson's presidency, he actually, what's the word I'm looking for?
Pardoned.
Thank you. He pardons these guys, a lot of them, including Dr. Mudd. Some of them are going to die. I can't remember which one of them. It might have been Arnold, but don't take my word for that. At the prison that they were at, because it was infested with mosquitoes and there was a yellow fever outbreak. So in fact, there was a conspiracy to kill the president of the United States, and 8 people were convicted for that. Interestingly enough, even when you have a true conspiracy, it is still surrounded by conspiracy theories.
So we had a real conspiracy of those people we just saw on the screen. They all conspired together to
Right.
kidnap the president.
Mhm.
That plot was found out. So then they conspired to kill the president. They killed him.
Mhm.
Whole group of people.
Right.
Real conspiracy. But yet we still invent fake conspiracy theories.
Yes, and just to correct something real quick, the kidnapping wasn't found out.
Oh, the
It
plans just changed.
Lincoln's
Okay.
plans changed, and so he got
Okay.
lucky. Well, I mean, maybe not lucky. I guess it'd be better to be kidnapped than shot. So not lucky. Right, but people still have a hard time thinking of this guy Booth, who really is a nobody. I mean, yeah, he's an actor. He's an actor. Like that's not.
No, that wasn't a big thing in the 1800s. It was a
yeah.
professional liar.
Yes.
Actors were not celebrated.
Okay.
Excuse me. So then how can this guy organize a conspiracy, to kill the president of the United States? What happens is that the news starts publishing things, true or not true. Other newspapers republish it. So what you can see in that headline right now, clearly this is a Southern newspaper because it says glorious news.
Oh my
Lincoln and
goodness.
Seward assassinated. Yeah. So that was a Southern newspaper. Your face says it all.
Okay. So biased news sources are not new.
Yeah. No, they're not. But it says Lincoln and Seward assassinated. So there were a lot of newspapers early on that said that Seward died too. Of course, we know that he did not. But so inaccurate information circulates quickly, and that's going to kind of lend to a lot of these conspiracy theories. I'm just going to walk you through a couple of them because they're fun. First of all, the Jews did it. I just wonder, is there anything that has ever happened in the world that we did not blame on the Jews, or that somebody did not blame on the Jews? I don't know. But logic told people that, the Confederacy must have something to do with it. If it wasn't the president of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis, then it must have been his Secretary of State, Judah Benjamin. And Judah Benjamin just happened to be a Jew. Therefore, the Jews did it. Okay, so yeah, there's one conspiracy theory. The second one is the Catholics. The Catholics must have been behind it because Mary Surratt, whose house they met at, was Catholic. So therefore, the Catholics must have been behind it, or even the Pope himself. Some people suggested that the Pope himself killed Abraham Lincoln. One conspiracy theory that actually got a lot of traction was that the Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton, was behind it. And that's because originally Ulysses S. Grant was supposed to, and his wife were supposed to accompany Mary Todd Lincoln, the president and his wife, to the play. There's two different accounts for why they didn't. One of them was that Mary Todd Lincoln opened her big mouth. She wasn't known for being
Tactful.
Thank you. That was a great way to describe that. She wasn't known for being tactful, and she had said something very tacky to Mrs. Grant, and so they didn't go because of that. Now, they said that they had the first chance to go visit their son who didn't live in D.C., and that's why they couldn't go, of course. But Lincoln invited Stanton, the Secretary of War, who declined, and then Lincoln asked for one of a Major Thomas Eckert to serve as his bodyguard for the evening, and Stanton also declined and sent a younger officer with him, Rothbone. I can't remember his rank. Actually.
So these people think, you got invited and you declined, which means you knew something bad was going to happen.
Well, so Stanton didn't let a higher ranking officer go who might have been able to protect him, sent this lower level officer. But then there's one more thing. After Booth shot the president, Stanton ordered all of the bridges going out of Washington, D.C. closed, except one, which was the Navy Yard Bridge. And that was the one that Booth took to escape. And so Stanton must have left that one open and told Booth to take that one to leave the city. So, stuff like that. But there was a guy who actually wrote a book about it. And this book, up until the 1970s, was a book that in a lot of graduate level histories, seminars, would be assigned. So this was a book that historians were reading. Now, today, do historians buy into this? No. Historians believe there was a conspiracy that was organized by John Wilkes Booth.
Right.
The vice president is another one. It's said that Mary Todd Lincoln herself believed this, that she blamed Johnson. She needed somebody to blame. Her life really sucked for lots of reasons. But she had already lost a son while they were in the White House who died. And so the vice president, of course, he was from the South. He was from Tennessee. So a lot of people thought that he must have been sympathetic to the Confederacy. And then there's another one that says Booth lived. And I'm really sorry. That it wasn't Booth. It was actually a farmhand that was shot that night on the Garrett farm, not Booth. That he moved to Texas. Told a few people, throughout his life that he had that he was actually John Wilkes Booth. Then moved to went by the last name St. Helen. Then moved to Edna, Oklahoma. Went by a different name. Was poisoned. Died of some poisoning there. I don't remember. His body was actually mummified by the undertaker, and said to have been, and then it circulated, went to circuses where people were able to view it, and were told they would be given $1,000 if they could prove that it wasn't actually John Wilkes Booth. It's insane. I mean, we had a body, so the thing is, unlike the next conspiracy theory we're going to learn about, the majority of the public agrees with professional historians about the Lincoln assassination, in that there was a conspiracy, but the conspiracy was one organized by John Wilkes Booth. So the majority of people believe that, and really we have a lot of evidence that corroborates that. The other stuff is fun to talk about, but not reality.
So going into that, fun to talk about, but not reality.
Yeah.
I remember when I was a teenager, I was fascinated by the connections, the coincidences connecting Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy. And
I think Benjamin mentioned it already in our comments.
Benjamin did mention it there. And I'm sure once we point out all of these coincidences, somebody else is going to become enamored with this idea. But yeah, so Professor Wilson, tell us all of these coincidences, things that Lincoln
and these
Kennedy,
aren't all of them. These are the ones I felt like typing out. So Lincoln is elected in 1860. Kennedy is elected in 1960, if we believe the curse. That explains that part. Lincoln's secretary is named Kennedy, and he warned him not to go to the theater. Kennedy's secretary is named Lincoln, and he warned him not to go to Dallas. Actually, I don't think I put this one in there, but Kennedy is killed in a Lincoln. Both are assassinated by Southerners, and both of those Southerners are named Johnson.
So wait, they're both assassinated by Southerners, and they're
both assassinated, by Southerners,
and they're both succeeded
by Southerners,
vice presidents who are Southerners named Johnson.
And I think
that's fantastic.
Johnson of Tennessee Johnson is born in 1809, and Johnson
LBJ
is born in 1909. So there's that connection too. They're born 100 years apart. Yeah. Both assassins are known by three names:
John Wilkes Booth, Lee Harvey Oswald.
Booth ran from a theater and was caught in a warehouse.
Yeah.
Oswald ran from a warehouse and was caught in a theater.
Yeah.
And then both Oswald and Booth are assassinated before they are put on trial.
Mysteriously.
Well, let's talk about that.
It's so they couldn't talk.
So what you're telling me is all of these things are coincidences. And even though they stack up and there's a great number of them, there is absolutely no logical explanation other than these are all coincidences.
I think given enough time and effort,
we could make this number of connections between any two people.
Yes.
Yes, I think so too.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to talk to you guys today about the Kennedy assassination. And I just want to start by saying, statistically, 75% of you don't agree with me. That's fine. I'm not here to change your mind. I'm here to give you facts. So we've been tracking belief in a Kennedy conspiracy theory since 1963. Literally the week after his death, Gallup asked Americans, do you think there was a conspiracy? And what I wanted to show you guys here is that the belief in conspiracies has highs and lows, ebbs and valleys. The reason for this is if you look at what's happening in our country, you can see direct parallels to the times when we most distrust our government. And during those times, we tend to believe in conspiracy theories.
Okay, so I'm seeing Vietnam.
If
Right.
you look at like 1975,
Yeah.
which is one of the peaks here, you have the Zapruder film that was released. You
Oh,
have
yeah.
Watergate. You have Vietnam. You have the House Select Committee on Assassinations giving a somewhat controversial opinion on the assassination. So lots of things play into this. So when you're asking people, do they believe in the Kennedy conspiracy theories, what you're really asking them is, do you trust your government? Do you believe that your government's telling you the truth? And this is how people answer.
Yes.
I mean,
It was
I
a
base-
resounding no. We don't
Okay.
believe the government's telling the truth.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if you watch the National Treasure 2 movie.
Which is where we get all of our history.
They're great movies.
In the description, when we're done with this, I'm going to put a PDF link up for you guys so you can link yourself to all the conspiracy theories and have fun going to search them. But I wanted to talk just about the most popular ones today. And then we'll talk about what we actually think happened. All right, so the first very, very, very popular theory is that Kennedy was killed by the U.S. government. There are two versions of this, which then spin out to hundreds of little versions of it. But one is that either the FBI, CIA, or Vice President Johnson ordered his death. And so that the Secret Service agents that were there were ordered to kill him. And another version of this is that there were Secret Service agents there that were trying to protect him from an attempt, and that they accidentally shot and killed him.
Oh, I didn't know that was a theory.
Yes, it's one of the theories. So this idea that he was shot by his own government, either accidentally or on purpose, is probably the most important one. The next theory, and this is the one that, if any of them were true, should be the one that people believe in, is that Castro or Cuba had something to do with this.
So you're saying that it's more likely that Castro would kill him than LBJ?
Yes.
And you're not just saying that because you love LBJ?
I love Johnson, but no. We tried 140 times to kill Castro during Operation Mongoose. And the attempts get more and more comical as we go. We tried to give him exploding shoes, exploding cigars. We tried to poison his food, and we killed his cook. And you would think after 140 attempts on your life, you're going to put two and two together and figure out who's trying to kill you. So if anybody had a reason to kill Kennedy, it's Castro. The last theory is that this has something to do with the mob. So in the 1960 election, Kennedy did accept campaign donations from several mobsters. And then his administration cracks down on them fairly harshly. It's not super harsh, but there is some constraint to what they're able to do after Kennedy is elected. And so maybe they feel betrayed.
Mm-hmm.
And so lots of people buy into that one. Again, you do not have to agree with me. Statistically, you don't. But when we talk about Lee Harvey Oswald, our background and our evidence really does point to him as being the killer. People don't want to believe that. And so there's a lot of things here that raise confusion or just bring up questions about Oswald. So the first thing people say is, Oswald probably couldn't be an assassin because he has a fairly troubled background. He might not have been able to get it together to do this. And then he's killed before he can put on trial. So maybe he was involved, but maybe he's a patsy and he knew too much, so they had to kill him.
Mm-hmm.
There's another problem here when we talk about evidence, and there's some confusion here over jurisdiction. In today's world, right now, it is a federal crime to kill the president. That was not true in the 1960s. So Dallas PD actually had jurisdiction of all the evidence. And there is some historical tension between the Dallas PD and the FBI, and they didn't want to give all of that evidence over. So a lot of times when you hear theories about like the magic bullet or missing pieces of evidence, it stems from this. You had two agencies not cooperating and working against each other rather than helping each other.
So that's not new either.
No. And then Dallas wasn't able to do a full examination of the body because the Secret Service agents took the body.
Right.
And that's not something that usually happens at a crime,
Mm-hmm.
As we go on away from Kennedy's death, we're going to have another pretty important assassination with Martin Luther King. And then we have Vietnam, and we have Watergate. We have Nixon saying, I'm not a crook, and then we find out he's lying to us.
Plus Bobby Kennedy.
Bobby Kennedy dies. So we have this distrust in our government. And we start to see that reflected in more and more people believing in these conspiracy theories. And then lastly, the reason we believe in these things is there are mistakes by the Warren Commission, which was put together by Johnson to investigate. And then in the 1970s by the House Select Committee on Assassinations. And that one was looking at more than just this Kennedy assassination, because we'd had a string of assassinations.
One of our students is asking what's circled in this image that you selected.
So in the background there, you see a man holding an umbrella.
Yes.
And so there is a theory that the umbrella man is the shooter from the grassy knoll.
No, the grassy knoll shooter is behind
the umbrella
that fence.
man.
No, but
is part of that theory, though. He's signaling.
Oh, so the shooter is way back there behind the fence line, and the umbrella man is providing like fence line is back here.
Yeah.
And of course, because I mean, if you live in Fort Worth, you can go and look at all of this yourself right now if you would like to.
At Dealey Plaza.
At Dealey Plaza in downtown Dallas. But the fence line is here, and so some people are saying this umbrella man was some kind of signal that he's in the right sight line.
And people are saying, oh, it's sunny. Why would he have an umbrella? Well, it's sunny at this point, but it was raining earlier that day.
Yeah.
So having an umbrella isn't unreasonable. And then there's some other things about people bringing umbrellas to marches as a protest. That's more of a British thing than an American thing. We don't have to get into that. But there could be reasons that a random person would have an umbrella.
Maybe that person was
But it doesn't involve signaling to a shooter.
Right.
But another reason that people believe this, right, is like John F. Kennedy was a very aspirational president, right? People really liked him.
They liked him after he died.
Yeah.
His approval rating's pretty low before he's shot and killed.
The best thing that could have happened to his presidency was him getting killed.
I mean, that's what I mean, though. So people look at him as like this bright figure in American politics.
He's this unfinished promise.
And
he could have done so much more.
And it's hard for us to think a crazed, troubled, weirdo,
Fort Worth graduate
individual killed this powerful blazing star of a president.
Yes.
So it's more comforting to think the CIA did it, right?
Possibly.
Then one person could have that much power and control.
Yes.
So it's again the same kinds of things we've been saying all semester. That conspiracy theories are comforting to us because we don't.
If you have a certain mindset,
it's an unpleasant notion, or it's.
We don't want to live in a world of chaos, right?
Yeah.
We want things to have meaning. Our brains try to give things meaning, even if there's not one there.
Yeah.
I do want to talk to you guys about Oswald, because Lee Harvey Oswald absolutely has the skills, the means, and the motive to kill Kennedy. We know that Lee Harvey Oswald,
making him the perfect patsy.
Oh my gosh. We know that
I should have been in here doing that to you with the flat Earth one.
We know that he's disaffected with the American government. We know he has a fascination with Cuba and with communism.
And Russia.
Yeah, well, that had kind of faded by this point. Now he's on to Cuba at this point. We know that he is in Mexico at the embassy trying to get passage to Cuba before he kills Kennedy. We have all of these connections. We have all of these things in his background that would point us to him being somebody who is likely to do this. We know that as far as his shooting skills, he has the ability to do this. On the 25th anniversary of the assassination, to prove a point, the Texas Rangers just set up a dummy and put blood packets in the head, and they drove it around the plaza, and they were trying to prove that you could get off the 3 shots in the time that you needed to do it, and they did it. It was tacky. They really didn't need it to do it that way.
Extremely tacky.
They didn't do that for the 50th anniversary. I just want y'all to note that.
We've learned.
Yeah. But they showed that physically it can be done. All right. Oswald has physical evidence at the scene. He's got fingerprints. We've got shell casings. We've got his fingerprints on the gun. They've done the bullet analysis on the gun. So
ballistics.
You
don't watch CSI, obviously.
I do not. So we know that the majority of the physical evidence points to Oswald. We have anecdotal evidence in the form of his neighbors and wife that points to Oswald. And then this is the part where maybe it's sad. Both the FBI and the CIA have pre-existing files on Oswald. And in both of those files, there are notes that he is likely to commit some sort of major crime. So had both the CIA and FBI been sharing their notes with each other,
A big red flag would have been going.
they would have had a giant red flag. And some of the theories that we talk about, like with the FBI being involved or the CIA being involved, if they're involved in anything, it's with trying to keep those files from the public because they don't want their failure of
So they're covering up the fact
They're covering
that
that they could have prevented this.
possibly prevented it.
If you believe they're withholding files on purpose, that's what they're withholding it for.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
so that's interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So
So I just wanted to say,
Sure.
Katie pointed out that last year, was it last year or the year before, that they released some of the assassination records.
yes, and more of them are coming.
Yeah, because some of them they didn't.
They
some
should have
didn't let
all been released.
Some of them go.
Yes.
Yeah.
The thing is, to release those kind of documents, because they do have agents' names in them,
Right.
and they have to go through and redact them.
Redact them all, yeah.
And there are thousands and thousands and thousands of pages here.
Yeah.
And they have to hand do it. So like, if you believe in conspiracy theories, you say, oh, it's proof that they don't want us to know stuff.
Right, but
But-
if you understand how the government works, then you.
You know that it's very, very slow.
Well, even the
Yeah.
fact that they're telling us they have these files
Yeah, that's
points to proof that the government's probably not trying to cover anything
right.
up. Because otherwise they would just say, oh, yep, we released them all.
Yeah, that's it. Well, I also, and Emma, you read my mind. That's exactly what I was thinking. Emma said, I also would not want to live in a world where a government kills its own president. Because, you're talking about conspiracy
Yes.
theories. It can be comforting to put meaning behind it. But yeah, I was thinking the exact same thing. I don't know if that's comforting or not. And if that comforts you, I really don't know what to say about you. Because it's more concerning to me that we could live in a country where our government has the president killed. So, sorry, y'all.
During the time that Kennedy is killed, we've talked about this a little bit before, we had a string of assassinations.
Mhm.
And so there were people at the time in the 1960s saying, well, maybe assassination is an effective agent of change. Maybe I can get the government to do what I want them to do or change socially what I want to change if I kill an important person. And so we wanted to give you guys kind of the top assassinations in our history and just talk through this idea of is an effective agent of change.
Right.
And I'm going to say no.
No, a resounding no.
So if you think what Booth was trying to do with Lincoln,
Right. He's trying to cause the U.S. government to fall into disarray, allow the Confederacy a time to kind of regroup, and win, ultimately, a war that they've already lost. Not successful in the least. And the government did not fall into disarray. It power transitioned smoothly into the hands of Johnson. Now, I guess you can argue they weren't successful because Johnson didn't die. But there were still plenty of people that the presidency would have went to.
and Lincoln benefits the same way Kennedy does, right?
Yeah,
He ends the
because-
war, he freed the slaves, and then before he can mess it up,
Right. And one of the things, I think I failed to say this too, with Edwin Stanton, one of the things that some people weren't so happy with him about was that he was going to take a softer approach towards the South in Reconstruction. He kind of felt like they had been punished enough. He just wanted the nation to heal. And so there were a lot of radical Republicans. The Secretary of War was in agreement that he was going to take too soft of an approach with the South in Reconstruction. Reconstruction was nasty. It was really bitter between the Republicans, and there were a lot of Republicans who were ready to fight him on it. And so he did. He absolutely benefited on that by not having to go up against them.
Garfield is assassinated by Guiteau. Guiteau is trying to become a civil servant. He thinks if he kills Garfield, then the new vice president will be grateful and will appoint him to be a civil servant. Turns out, if you kill a president, you don't get to have a government job.
Mm-hmm.
William McKinley is killed by an anarchist. So he thinks if he kills McKinley, it's going to throw our country in anarchy. Doesn't happen.
No
Oh, anarchists.
anarchy. Theodore Roosevelt takes over as president, and it's still organized. It's still the U.S. government. So no, why do you want anarchy? But no, that doesn't work.
Booth kills Kennedy. It does not send us
No,
any kind of
Booth did not kill.
Well-
sorry, Oswald killed Kennedy. Sorry.
Good job.
Oswald killed Kennedy.
Well, and the thing
There's
is,
a conspiracy theory.
things that Kennedy hasn't been able to accomplish as president are now going to get pushed through because
It's that deification.
yes, if Kennedy wanted it, then we have to do it. We've got to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade because Kennedy wanted it. And so
Civil rights laws.
Mm-hmm.
yes,
Martin Luther King Jr. was killed by an assassin. If anything, it spurred again the deification of King. King is the first American that has his own holiday named after him. If he dies of natural causes, that doesn't happen.
right.
And then Bobby Kennedy's on here too.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, he was not elected yet, so
Right.
it's again that uncashed check. What could he have done?
Mm-hmm.
But we
So
won't know.
what you're kind of saying is that it has the reverse outcome that people want it to have.
Generally,
We want to stop President Kennedy's agenda or Dr. King's agenda, and instead, because
unless your objective is to turn them into an American hero.
because they've been assassinated, they're more revered than they were.
Yeah, because the only reason that Kennedy is remembered as a great president is because he died.
Interesting.
All right, so the way that we ended the last one is going to be the way that we end this one. You don't have to believe us. You can go do your own research.
And I do want to say, it's fun to say, I think that this was a conspiracy, and I know I made some jokes about the CIA
Oh, I love
killing
talking about conspiracy theories.
Kennedy.
I just don't believe them.
But yeah, I mean, you do have to rely on real information to make your assumptions or to test your assumptions. And if you're going to enter into an academic discourse about something, then you need to be able to support whatever it is that you're saying.
That's exactly right. And that's, in a nutshell, why historians aren't going to buy into most of these conspiracy theories. It's why they believe that Booth killed Lincoln and why.
And not Kennedy.
Yeah, because I just almost said Kennedy, actually. And why, historians believe that Oswald killed Kennedy and not Johnson, even though I really like talking about Johnson doing it, but I don't really think he did.
So because I'm an English professor, I know how to do research, I know how to read information, but tell me about historical research. If I'm interested in something in our history, what are the ways that I can get reliable information?
So the first thing a historian is going to tell you to do is go to the primary documents.
And that's what we have a picture of, by the way. This is Nicolas Cage examining
Looking at a
the
primary
back of the
document.
Declaration of Independence.
I'm pretty sure there's some lemon juice involved
Yes,
there.
lemon juice,
and a blow
Q-tips,
dryer.
and blow dryer,
Yeah.
yes. This is what happens when
This is what
Professor
historians
Mertens
do,
lets me
right?
take control of the PowerPoint. I put in a picture of Nicolas Cage. But, so yeah, primary documents like the Declaration of Independence or letters,
Newspaper articles.
Yeah, they're original documents from that time period, eyewitness accounts.
Letters, diaries, all of that
Mhm.
stuff. Really, really, really important for us. The second thing that you should do is go look in archives.
Mhm.
And a lot of those times they'll be compiled for you. So everything that has to do with this one thing is in this one box.
Mhm.
And you can go through it and you can read all of those things.
And some of the archives even have that stuff online now.
More and more.
Yeah, more and more. They're definitely scanning them and putting them online. So a lot of that stuff is at your fingertips now.
if you're interested
Be able
in
to go look
anything
at.
that happened in Texas, the portal to Texas history
It's amazing.
has all of, newspapers and photographs and all kinds of things. And you can just search the portal to Texas history and find all kinds of original and archival documents. Absolutely.
Let's see. We want you to read scholarly sources. So go look for verified historians. Don't look for the person that's self-published and put their book on Amazon. Look for somebody who's had to have some peer review.
Don't be looking at blogs. Blogs aren't it's mostly somebody's opinion. So you're going to, if it's a scholarly historian, they're going to footnote all their sources so you know where they're getting all that information. It's going to be peer reviewed, which means another historian has reviewed it. And so peer reviewed journals, you're going to find those through the library's website.
And that's not to say all historians agree with everything.
No, absolutely not. They definitely disagree on a lot of things.
So when you're reading these sources, read them critically. Look and see if the historian is trying to guide you somewhere, if they're trying to convince you of something or lead you somewhere, and be aware of that as you go in. When you can, look for expert consensus.
Yeah, what do they agree on?
If 90% of the experts believe something, there's a reason.
Right.
Yeah, that's what the evidence is pointing at. That's likely the truth.
And if there's a way to validate something with hard sciences, do that.
Yeah, so like carbon dating or physics.
Like with Oswald, the fingerprints.
Yeah.
The ballistics.
You learned a word.
I learned
I
a
do
word.
want to. I do want to clarify one thing
Okay.
that Dawn. So
That's
one of
where
our
I was going
students
to.
is bringing up a point, and I appreciate that Donnelly brought this point up. I want to clarify that what we were saying here is that what the assassins intended to do was to silence or stop an agenda,
Well,
and what they ended up doing was furthering an agenda. I don't think anyone would argue the point that Martin Luther King
no.
wouldn't have been
But
effective.
I will
had
double
he
down on
lived.
Kennedy, though, because Kennedy didn't accomplish anything, pretty much, as president. He wasn't able to get through, legislation that he wanted to get through. I mean, he really was accomplishing nothing. He gave some good speeches, and so that's what we point to.
His 8 major things he submitted to Congress, he got 3 passed. So, I mean, his record was not great on that.
No. And if he would have lived, he wouldn't have been remembered as one of the great presidents.
It's that unfulfilled promise.
Right.
That
And
we
I
look
think
to.
this speeches, and I think he made a lot of speeches about civil rights. He made a lot of speeches about freedom and service. And I think those kinds of ideals
those resound with
are
people.
the
Absolutely.
kinds of things that people admire. And so had he lived, perhaps he would have been able to accomplish more, perhaps not. But certainly the fact that he was assassinated gave him a more favorable, lasting reputation.
Well, and really, it's Martin Luther King. Yeah, nobody's saying he didn't accomplish great things, because he absolutely did.
Mm-hmm.
He was very impactful in the civil rights movement, and you can speak a lot more to that. But so he did great things. We're just, as Professor Wilson Mertens pointed out, would he have had a day dedicated to him if he had lived? I mean, no. I mean, we can't say no, definitely, but. He's still kind of at the peak, or maybe it's beginning to taper off his influence. And so if his influence is beginning to taper off at the point of his death, there was no more tapering off. So he went out, kind of went out on top, so to speak, where he was still very influential. And so that helped. Now, again, that's not to say that King wouldn't have had a lasting influence, because he would have. He accomplished a lot. But we're able to remember him just for that now, because of when he was assassinated.
I don't know. They're talking about TV documentaries, so I don't know. It depends. The answer is it depends on the documentary. And it depends on the viewpoint. So if you're getting historical information from a documentary, I mean, if it's using archival footage and interviewing historians.
If it's Ken Burns, you're probably okay.
No, you're probably not, actually. But if you're using archival footage and you're interviewing historians and history professors or people who witnessed things firsthand, then it's probably a pretty accurate source of information.
But you should always go back to the sources yourselves.
Yeah.
When possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah, don't just take everybody's word for it. If you can, and that's again, to point back to historians cite their sources, and so you can look that up in the footnotes, and then you can go back to those sources. You just.
I'm sorry.
And so you can go back and see what sources they were looking at to come to those conclusions, and so you can go back and you can look at those yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I got.
Okay, so. We're going to give you guys a second to ask any questions or points of clarification. But while we do, I will let you know that in just a few moments, the link will appear, and that link will appear underneath the video in YouTube in the video description. If you click that link and complete the Google form, you will be able to receive extra credit if it's being offered by your instructor. The link's going to ask for your name, your instructor's name, what class you're taking to get the extra credit for, and then a couple of questions to make sure that you watched and learned from the presentation today. We send that information to your faculty member, to your teacher, so you don't have to tell them that you attended. If it's after the 48 hours, so if you're looking for the link or if you're trying to get credit after Friday at about 3 p.m., then you'll need to contact your instructor and ask them if you're eligible to do an alternate assignment, like a summary or a paragraph or some kind of writing assignment of that kind. But the link will be here in just a couple of minutes. And I do want to remind you that our next webinar is next week.
No, next week is spring break.
Next week
The
is
week
spring
after
break.
The Tuesday
so the
evening.
Tuesday
spring
after
break.
spring break, it's an evening webinar, and it will be about vaccinations and vaccination conspiracy theories, and that's Tuesday evening at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, 6:30.
And can I just say, if you would like to help your professors out, and I know y'all want to help your professors out, include your course and section number
Yeah, that doesn't make
in
it
the
easier.
Google form. It helps us to
Put your
not
credit
have
in
to
there.
sort through a bunch of classes to try to find you. Yeah, your grade's going to get entered quicker. And if you don't know where that is, go into your MyTCC account. The class that you click on will have that number, but in the class, top left-hand corner, above all of the links on the left side of the screen, it has your class number.
So your
And
section number is like a history 1301, and then it'll say dash.
-86.
It's going to start with an 8. It's going to start with an 8. All right, guys. Everybody, thank you for joining us, and we will see you back in a couple of weeks.
Yes, y'all have a great spring break.
Make smart decisions.
Please.